Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, and I need to tell you what happened the night my wife decided to humiliate me in the cruelest way she could think of. She didn't slip up, she didn't get caught in some accident. No. She looked me in the eyes, smirked, and said, "I'm spending the night at Mason's party." Mason, her ex. She wanted to hurt me, and she wanted me to know it. I stood there, stunned, holding a half-burned grilled cheese I had made for us, while she walked out in a dress I had never seen before. She didn't even flinch when I begged her to stay. She slammed the door and left me choking on my own silence. I sat in that empty apartment for hours, the clock ticking louder with every minute she wasn't home. Midnight. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen so long that my eyes blurred, but no message came. I paced. I cried. I kept whispering, she wouldn't really do this, right? But the longer I waited, the clearer it became, she wanted me to picture her there, with him, while I sat in the dark. By 4 a.m, I hadn't closed my eyes once. And that's when something inside me cracked. Because if she thought I'd just sit here helpless, she had no idea what I had been planning while she was gone. When she finally stumbled through the door after sunrise, makeup smeared, shoes dangling from her hand, she froze the second she saw what was waiting for her. And I swear, for the first time in years, she was the one who looked terrified. She stood frozen in the doorway like she'd walked into the wrong apartment. Her keys were still dangling in her hand, one heel in her other, the strap of her tiny purse sliding down her shoulder. Her hair was a mess, the kind of mess that isn't caused by wind or weather but by a night spent somewhere she didn't belong. I didn't say a word. I just sat there at the kitchen table, lit only by the soft yellow glow of the overhead lamp, a printed envelope in front of me and her suitcase by the door. It was the same suitcase she used on our honeymoon. The same one she packed for her girls' trip to Seattle last year, where I now suspect there was no Brenda waiting at the hotel like she said. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something sarcastic or deflective, her usual go-to, but she caught herself. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way I was staring straight through her. What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head toward the envelope. She didn't move. So I pushed it across the table with one finger. Slowly. Quietly. She finally walked over, her bare feet soft against the tile. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up and opened it. I watched her eyes scan the first page, then the second, then freeze. She looked up at me, her face pale. "You filed for divorce?" she breathed. I nodded once, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in days. "But Curtis," she stammered, "nothing happened. It was just—" "No," I interrupted, still calm. "It wasn't just anything. It was the way you looked at me before you left. Like I didn't matter. Like hurting me was the point. You wanted me to suffer, and you made sure I did." She sat down slowly, as if her legs were giving out. For the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback. No jokes. No insults. Just silence. And I knew then, she expected me to rage. To cry. To beg. But I had already done all that. Last night. Alone. While she was with him. She blinked hard, as if hoping she'd wake up from a nightmare, but the nightmare was mine. And now, finally, it was hers too. She sat there gripping the table's edge like the floor might vanish beneath her. I could see her mind scrambling for the next move, like she was still trying to control the narrative, even now. But I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just watched. The silence between us felt like a loaded gun, one breath too deep and it might explode. She finally broke it with, "Curtis, can we talk about this?" Her voice cracked on the word talk like she hadn't spoken with honesty in years. I wanted to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. I'd spent so long drowning in her little games, quietly convincing myself that things would change, that maybe next week she'd remember she used to love me. But this, what she did, this wasn't forgettable. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And now she was shocked that I received it. I already talked to someone, I replied, leaning back in the chair. A lawyer. While you were gone. Her face twisted slightly, not in guilt, but in fear. Not of losing me, no, of losing the version of me that stayed no matter how far she pushed. She was never afraid to hurt me. But she was terrified of losing control. She stood abruptly, knocking the chair back, pacing now. You're overreacting. I didn't even do anything. Mason and I just talked. He had friends over. It wasn't like. You stayed the night. That shut her up. She turned away, arms crossed, back stiff. I could almost see her replaying the evening in her head, trying to figure out what I knew, what I didn't. But honestly, I didn't care what happened between her and Mason. I cared that she wanted me to imagine it. That was the betrayal. The cruel, deliberate performance. The real infidelity was emotional. Strategic. Designed to break me down. And the thing is, it almost worked. But last night, sitting in the dark while she disappeared into a past she claimed was dead, I realized I was done playing the fool. She lit the match thinking I'd burn with it. She never thought I'd walk out of the flames. She didn't speak again for almost a full minute. Just paced. Slowly at first, then more frantically, like movement would somehow rewind the morning and unsign the document sitting in front of her. Her eyes darted to the suitcase I'd packed, neatly, painfully, and back to me. She didn't ask what was inside. She knew. Her favorite sweater. Her toothbrush. The little framed photo from our trip to Maine that she used to keep on her nightstand, now face down in the lining. I included everything she might forget in her rush to spin the story her way. You can't actually be serious, she muttered, still not facing me. This is dramatic, even for you. Even for me. That one stung. Like I was the unstable one, like her dragging me through emotional gravel for years hadn't been the real performance. I stood up slowly and walked past her to the coat closet. I opened the door and pulled out something small, barely noticeable. A tiny, dusty jewelry box. Not new. Worn from being hidden for years. Do you know what this is? I asked quietly, holding it out. She turned around, brow furrowed. Curtis, what? I opened it. Inside was a ring. Not hers. Not mine. A little silver band with a turquoise stone. Years ago, before we were even married, she lost a friend in a car accident. An old college roommate. She cried for weeks. I remembered how devastated she was and spent hours tracking down a copy of the exact ring her friend used to wear. I found it online. Paid extra to have it delivered by her birthday. And when I gave it to her, she cried again, but the good kind. She wore it every day for nearly 3 years. And then, slowly, it just vanished. I found this, I said, placing it gently on the table. Under the passenger seat in your car. Last week. Her mouth opened slightly. She blinked, once, twice. That's not possible. Isn't it? I asked. You told me you lost it. You said you must have taken it off at work or maybe at your mom's. But it's here. In your car. And now you expect me to believe last night was just talking? She said nothing. The silence was louder than any lie she could have offered. That's when I realized something, she hadn't been trying to hide it. Not really. She left the ring like a breadcrumb, maybe hoping I'd find it, maybe testing how far she could push before I snapped. I don't know if it was guilt or cruelty, but the result was the same. I pushed the box back toward her. You lost the right to talk me down, I said. You lost it a long time ago. You just didn't notice because I was still here. And that, somehow, hit her harder than the divorce papers ever could. She didn't touch the ring. Didn't even look at it again. Her eyes stayed locked on mine like she was trying to read how far I'd actually go this time. But I could tell, it was starting to sink in. This wasn't just another one of our arguments where I'd eventually fold and apologize for making her uncomfortable. This wasn't like the time she went silent for 3 days after I asked why she still followed Mason on social media. This was different. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was responding. She finally broke the stillness with a low, bitter laugh. So what? You want a medal now? For finally growing a spine? I flinched before I could stop myself. I hated that she could still do that to me, twist the knife even when her hands were already bloody. I leaned back against the counter, folding my arms. No. I don't want a medal, I said. I want a moment of honesty from you. Just once. You want honesty? She snapped, stepping closer. Fine. I didn't go to that party just to catch up. I went because I wanted you to feel how I feel every day. Dull. Ignored. Like I'm just something you forget is in the room until you trip over it. It should have hurt more than it did. But all I felt was numbness. Not because she was wrong, but because I knew she'd been feeling that way and never once tried to fix it without breaking me in the process. Then why not just leave? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Why not say something instead of staging a performance meant to wreck me? She turned away again, arms crossed, her silhouette trembling. Because I didn't want you to give up on me. I stared at her, stunned. That was her twisted logic. Break me to keep me. Hurt me to make me prove I'd stay. And for years, I had. Through the cold shoulders, the passive-aggressive digs, the mysterious late nights. I stayed. I thought love meant holding on, even when it shredded you. But now, for the first time, I realized that maybe love also meant knowing when to let go. I didn't give up, I whispered. You did. You just hoped I'd carry the blame so you wouldn't have to feel it. She didn't answer. Didn't argue. And that silence. It was the most honest thing she'd given me in years. She stood there quietly, arms still crossed like some kind of self-made armor, but her shoulders had dropped. The sharpness in her jaw, the stubborn tension, it all started to crumble. I had never seen her like that. Not even after our biggest fights. Not even the night she disappeared for hours and claimed she just needed to drive around. This wasn't the usual clash. This wasn't emotional warfare with a safe word. This was something deeper, colder, like watching a house collapse that had been burning behind the walls for years. I waited for her to say something, anything. But the silence kept stretching between us like a thread pulled tighter and tighter, ready to snap. I didn't want her to cry. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted truth, raw and ugly, without the usual performance layered on top. But instead, she moved toward the hallway, stopped by the door where her suitcase waited, and asked the one question I never expected, where am I supposed to go? It hit me in a way I didn't anticipate. Not because I cared. But because that question wasn't about regret, it was about logistics. She didn't ask how to fix us. She didn't ask what I needed. She asked what hotel she should book. Like she had already started calculating her next move the moment she realized she couldn't manipulate her way out of this one. I looked at her, long and hard, and said, wherever you feel comfortable being alone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. That moment right there, it was the funeral of 1,000 second chances. She didn't say another word. Just bent down slowly, zipped the suitcase I'd packed for her, and rolled it toward the door. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors. Just the sound of her wheels on the hardwood floor as she pulled away from the life she once swore she'd never walk out of. I stood in the doorway after she left, the sun cutting hard through the blinds, lighting up dust I never knew was there. The apartment was quiet again, but this time it wasn't a threatening kind of quiet. It was peaceful. Hollow, but peaceful. The kind of stillness that lets you breathe and break at the same time. A few hours passed before I opened my phone. I stared at her contact name for a long time. My thumb hovered over it, then moved past it and opened another thread, one with my older brother, Nathan. We hadn't talked in months. Not since I cancelled a fishing trip last minute because Clara had a surprise dinner planned that never actually happened. I typed, "Hey. You free to talk?" He replied within seconds. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. But just hearing his voice on the other end of the line was enough to remind me that there were still parts of my life worth holding on to. Parts that existed before the coldness. Before the manipulation. Before I became the man pacing in the dark while his wife danced with ghosts. And as strange as it sounds, that conversation with Nathan. It was the first time in months I didn't feel alone. The weekend after Clara left was a strange blur of numb rituals and quiet collapses. I vacuumed the living room even though it was already clean. I rearranged the books on the shelf alphabetically, then by color, then by genre, not because it mattered, but because sitting still felt dangerous. When everything finally stopped moving, I stared at the empty side of the bed for hours. The dent in the pillow she used was still there, like her absence hadn't quite made up its mind yet. But even that faint imprint felt like a lie. The real absence wasn't physical. It was emotional, spiritual, like a color drained from the air. On Sunday morning, Nathan showed up without warning. I hadn't even given him the address, but he somehow remembered it from that one time he dropped off a birthday gift Clara never opened. He walked in holding 2 cups of gas station coffee and a grocery bag that smelled suspiciously like burnt bacon and freezer waffles. He didn't ask if he could stay. He just sat down, kicked off his boots, and turned on a basketball game neither of us cared about. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. And it was perfect. Eventually, I told him everything. Not in one clean story, but in stuttering, out-of-order flashes. About the way she stared through me the night she left for Mason's party. About the ring I found in her car. About the years of small humiliations I'd swallowed and called love. Nathan didn't interrupt. He just nodded occasionally and refilled my coffee. And when I finally said, I think she wanted me to hate myself enough to stop trying, he didn't argue. He just said, yeah. Sounds about right. Later that afternoon, he helped me box up the remaining traces of her, the photo albums, the framed, our first Christmas ornament, the dried bouquet from our anniversary still sitting on the hallway table. We didn't burn anything. We didn't smash any plates. We just put everything in cardboard, labeled it, and stacked it by the front door. Quiet. Methodical. Like packing up a museum exhibit that never meant much to begin with. But the real moment came that night, when I checked my email. There it was, an unread message from Clara, sent 3 hours earlier. The subject line was a single word, wait. I opened it with trembling hands, expecting a wall of excuses, or worse, a manipulative monologue full of half-apologies and rewrites of history. But it wasn't long. It wasn't clever. It was short. 5 sentences. Seeing the suitcase by the door broke me more than I expected. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I thought you'd chase me, like always. I don't know who I am without your forgiveness. Please call me. I stared at the screen for a long time. I read it 5 times. 10. I don't know what I was hoping to find in between the lines, remorse, love, understanding, but all I saw was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing the version of me who stayed silent for years. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger. No longing. Just a strange, clean stillness, like the moment after a deep breath when you realize the storm passed without you noticing. I didn't reply. The next few weeks passed like quiet waves. Not crashing. Just steady, slow, patient. I deleted Clara's email. I didn't even save it to reread later. I didn't block her number either, I just didn't answer. Her silence after that said more than anything she ever could have written. And I realized. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. What I needed was distance, and peace. I started walking again. Not for exercise, but just to move. Every morning before work, I'd walk the path near the lake, the one Clara always said was too quiet for her. But I found comfort in the silence. One morning, an elderly man in a green flannel jacket nodded at me and offered a small wave. The next day, he waved again. By the third, he handed me a paper cup of coffee and said, "You looked like someone who needed this." I nearly cried on the spot. Not because of the coffee, but because someone noticed me. Noticed me. No expectations. No games. Just human kindness. Eventually, I began fixing things around the apartment, things I'd been ignoring for years. The leaky faucet. The blinking kitchen light. Even the bookshelf Clara always hated because it didn't match the vibe. I kept it. I painted it. And for the first time, the place felt like it belonged to me. One afternoon, Nathan invited me to a barbecue with some of his friends. Normally, I'd have said no. But something in me said to go. And there, between bites of dry ribs and awkward small talk, I met someone. Her name was Eliza. Not flashy, not loud. She laughed at the same weird jokes I did. We talked for 3 hours and didn't check our phones once. I didn't think it was a moment at first, just a nice conversation. But sometimes, the quietest moments leave the loudest echoes. I don't know what comes next. I'm not suddenly whole. I'm still healing. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm becoming someone I actually recognize. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we don't get to rewrite the past, but we do get to walk away from it. With scars, sure. But also with strength. So to anyone out there holding on to something that's slowly killing you, I hope you find the courage to let go before you forget how to breathe. And if you've made it this far, thank you for being here. This has been my story on the Reddit Confessions channel. If you've ever experienced a turning point in your life, a moment when everything shifted, share it in the comments. Maybe it was something you walked away from, or someone. We'd love to hear how your history shaped your healing. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more real stories that go deeper than just the drama. Sometimes, the truth hurts, but it also sets you free.